22 years later, the Phoenix Lights event still stands as one of the most compelling modern UFO mass sighting cases ever. With over 10,000 witnesses and so many similar reports, it is no wonder the case has captivated so many. With so many large triangular craft witnessed, possibly as big as a mile wide, what were they doing? By many accounts, it may have been nothing more than a peaceful demonstration by what may have been otherworldly visitors. What was the message they were trying to send us? Why did the Air Force try to put forth the explanation that these sightings were nothing more than people seeing flares from aircraft operating on the Barry Goldwater range? With so many credible witnesses, to include Dr. Lynne Kitei, law enforcement officials, air traffic control officials, a famous actor, former pilots, and the former Governor Fife Symington, who eventually stated that what he witnessed on that night was not of this world, how could the Air Force provide such an ill-advised explanation for these mass sightings? Could they have been experimental U.S. aircraft, as some have suggested? If so, why would they be flying over such a large city like Phoenix? This is not the way U.S. experimental aircraft operate. Could they have been Chinese or Russian advanced craft? It would be a far cry from what we know about these adversaries' capabilities. Of note, a very similar sighting occurred over St. Petersburg, Russia, about a month before the Phoenix Lights event. Is this really an advanced and peaceful alien civilization that is letting us know they are here and have no intent to do us harm? And what do you make of so many people feeling like they were getting a sort of telepathic peaceful message from these visitors? Are they interdimensional beings, time travelers, or travelers from a distant star system? There are so many questions left unanswered. Dr. Lynne Kitei, a medical doctor, best-selling author, and key witness to the Phoenix Lights sightings, joins me to examine many of these questions and more.
The opinions and views expressed by the guests of Passion for the Paranormal are not always the views and opinions expressed by the host.
Well, greetings and welcome once again to Passion for the Paranormal, bringing a passion for the paranormal to you. I'm your host, Curry Stegan, and it's so great to be back with you once again for another great episode. Never have I been more excited about a guest than the guest who's joining me for this episode. Her name is Dr. Lynne Kitei, and Dr. Lynne is not only a medical doctor, she's also a best-selling author, executive producer of the Phoenix Lights documentary, and a key witness to the 1997 Phoenix Lights UFO case. So it's so great to have her joining me on the show. I think you're really going to love this discussion and what I believe to be one of the most compelling mass sighting UFO cases in modern history. So if you haven't already, please head over to the Facebook page at facebook.com/passion, the number 4, the paranormal, and like and follow us there. You can also follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/passion, the number 4, the para. That's P-A-R-A. And if you're an iTunes user, please offer a quick review of the show and subscribe. You can also subscribe if you're a Google Play user, and you can also catch the show on Stitcher now. So many different ways you can access past episodes. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into the discussion with Dr. Lynne Kitei. And once again, I really think you're going to love tonight's episode. And thanks so much for tuning in. Okay, so my guest today is Dr. Lynne Kitei, and Dr. Lynne is an internationally acclaimed physician, health educator, and a key witness to the 1997 Phoenix Lights UFO sightings. She put a very successful medical career on hold to pursue her now best-selling book, The Phoenix Lights, A Skeptics Discovery That We Are Not Alone, and to work as the executive producer of the award-winning Phoenix Lights documentary. Dr. Lynne, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you for letting me share the rest, actually the inside Phoenix Lights story, which has become, the mass sighting has become the most witnessed, most documented, and most important mass anomalous aerial phenomena sighting in modern history, if not all history. The story is just incredible, and there is so much misinformation out there. I have taken extreme lengths as a medical doctor, as a scientist, a physician, as an experiencer, as an educator, to really compile the most credible data. And also, after thousands of people saw what I had been seeing for 2 years prior to the mass sighting and documenting on film, actually the only person who has 35 millimeter photographs of these phenomena that have been authenticated by military and university-based optical physicists and experts as true unknowns. I pushed my whole medical career aside for 7 years. I'm a medical doctor. I have dedicated my life's work to community education of vital health issues, discovery education, distributed to my AIDS and teen pregnancy and substance abuse prevention education programs. But when this fell in my lap, I felt, and I didn't know anything about this topic, by the way. I had no knowledge, no interest, but it literally and figuratively fell into my lap. And again, once thousands of people saw what I had been documenting and seeing, I felt obliged to find out what was going on and find a logical source and meaning for what I had witnessed and photographed, which 22 years later I have yet to find. What I did do was push my whole medical career aside, kept an intricate diary, ended up 7 years later after staying anonymous. I stayed anonymous. I let my video out there and some pictures, but I stayed anonymous for 7 years, and then finally had a 750-page journal that I condensed the best of what I had found and documented, and finally came forward in 2004 with the first edition, and it's now going into its fourth edition, of the Phoenix Lights, A Skeptics Discovery That We Are Not Alone, because it keeps evolving as new things happen. Just this past year, which is amazing, two things happened this past year. One was the New York Times, someone leaked that the Pentagon had a $22 million study of military and pilot UFO sighting reports, and which was funded in association with Harry Reid. He actually got it together, and there is, that opened up a Pandora's box, and actually showed that the military and government are definitely aware and studying these. But what was really neat is that to go back to when this all began for me was in 1997, and let me just say, it's not about me, it's about the data, and ultimately, I felt if I can be a credible voice so people actually look at the data, then I've done my job. But when you go back to 95, both my husband, who's also a physician, and I lived mountainside, high on the mountain in Paradise Valley, Arizona, with a panoramic view of the city skyline. And if anybody's on the internet or wants to take a peek at the Phoenix Lights Network website, if you Google Phoenix Lights, usually comes up in the first handful, Phoenix Lights Network website, and go to the photo page, you will see the topography and the view from where we live, which is pretty spectacular. We really enjoy watching the lights out there, street lights and car lights and plane lights and helicopter lights, so we're quite aware of the different lights out there. This was really different, and this was right outside our bedroom window, literally and figuratively. My husband called me to our window. I was taking a leisurely bath. It was the night before my birthday, and I don't believe in coincidence anymore, but this happened to be the eve of my birthday. I was relaxing in the bath, and he was on the phone with my mother-in-law back east. We're from Philadelphia originally, and she had called to wish me a happy birthday, and his feathers never got ruffled. He was on several state and hospital medical boards, but he sounded a little alarmed and said, "Get over here quick, what the heck is this?" And I grabbed my towel, run to the window, and I always go back to this sighting because I saw it up close and personal. And right outside our window, less than 100 yards from our window, and a little below us were 3 amber orbs. Now, I call them an orb because the light did not extend outside the edge. It was self-contained. And there were 3 distinct objects, one on top and 2 closely aligned underneath. And they were about 50, 75 feet off of a very treacherous desert landscape. And I looked to see if anybody was creating it there. I couldn't imagine anybody even being there, but there was nothing. It was darkness. And, when you have an experience like that, you don't move. I wanted to get my camera, my video camera, but it was downstairs. And then I tried to take in everything mentally, the size, the shape, the color. They were about 3 to 6 feet each. Again, they were oval shaped like an egg on its side. The light within each orb was very different than any other light out there. It was an amber color throughout, uniform amber color, but every other light out there glared. These did not glare at all. And I thought, you know what? If I don't get a picture of this, nobody's going to believe it. And I go running to the closet to grab my 35 Instamatic camera. It was a cheap little Instamatic, but I kept it there to take our beautiful sunsets in Arizona. I collect sunsets. And as I'm doing so, my husband calls me back. He says, get over here quick. One of them is disappearing. And as we both watched, and again, I always go back to this sighting because it was spectacular. The top orb, without budget, started to dim, like a dimmer switch. It was like imploding, shrinking, very, very slowly, mechanically, as if there was an intelligence behind it, until it was pea-size and then disappeared. But it felt like it was still there. And I, where'd it go? And I stepped out on the balcony. I got a quick picture of the two lower orbs and immediately noticed an eerie silence, as if time had stopped. It was just incredibly bizarre. I mean, it was just like time had stopped. And as intently as I am staring at these two lower orbs, and I did not admit this to anyone until 2 years later after the mass sighting, it felt like something was watching me. And going through my mind at that exact moment, I was thinking, who are you? What are you? Do you know that I'm here? I would love to meet you. That's exactly what I was thinking. The next thing I remember, the left bottom orb started to implode, started to shrink. And something told me to take a picture, and I quickly took a picture of it. That was the only picture that turned out at the time. But for me, it was confirmation that I did see something. We both saw something very unusual. I happened to get a picture of one half disappeared and one still there, but I didn't even know who to show it to. I knew no one who was into the topic, and I just wondered for 2 years what this advanced technology, which as an educated person, I had no idea was here on Earth, what was it doing outside our bedroom window? And of course, when we're in our bedroom and we're, one wall is a window, we get to see whatever pops up out there, whether it's dust storms or haboobs, they call them in Arizona, or, strange lights or whatever, or a fire, or even flares. We occasionally see the military deploying flares, but it's in another direction. But at any rate, didn't see anything, even remotely close to these orbs that we saw outside our window until 2 years later, January of 1997, I noticed when I'm in the bedroom, 3 giant orbs, but at a distance in the northwest. And I'm watching them. They're in a line formation, equidistant from each other. And I'm thinking, wow, strangely similar, because they were amber color. And they started to disappear, like shrink, just like they did in 95. And I thought to myself, strangely similar to 95. And they were gone. Mentioned it to my husband. He kind of blew it off. The next night, he was at a medical board meeting, and I was at the sliding glass door, the Arcadia door that's perpendicular to the big window that I had stepped up out in 95, and I happened to notice the same 3 orbs in the same formation, line formation, equidistant, now in front of South Mountain. And I knew they were in front of South Mountain because there are red blinking lights on top of South Mountain to alert planes coming into Sky Harbor International Airport, which is right in front of South Mountain. So I run downstairs, I grab my video camera, it was fully charged, I go outside, I got about 18 seconds worth, and the battery went dead. I thought, whoa, that's really strange. And I go inside and I hook up the battery. I go outside, they're gone. About a half hour later, my husband comes up to drive, and I walked outside and I said, honey, remember I told you about the 3 giant amber orbs in a line formation last night in the far northwest? About a half an hour ago, they were right in front of South Mountain. As I'm pointing, they reappeared. It was like, whoa, I got to get a picture of this. So I run upstairs. I grab my 35 millimeter camera, which is a Canon Instamatic camera. I get out onto the balcony. As I'm ready to shoot the 3, suddenly 6 lights in an equidistant line, massive span over a mile wide, pop up over the 3. It was unnerving. And again, if anybody is on the Phoenix Lights Network website photo page, the first picture of that series is wavy because I'm shaking. Okay, not having an explanation for 95. The only thing going through my mind is, oh my gosh, is this a mothership or a fleet? What is this?
Right.
But I kept clicking away, and thankfully I did. Yes, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, so you had the early 1995 initial sighting experience. Prior to this, would you have considered yourself a skeptic on this topic until you had...
Yeah, it's a good question. That's a very good question. I am a healthy skeptic by nature, okay? One must be open when you're a physician to anything walking through the door. But I have to see it to believe it. And I did see it. And it's not even a belief. It's a knowing. I mean, I saw it, and I got pictures of it, which cannot be explained or denied. But what was really amazing is that the second picture, 2 months before the mass sighting, is exactly what people would describe 2 months later during the mass sighting. But this is in January of 97, of 5 lights in a V formation. And it looks like there's 2 underneath, but actually people would describe 5 lights in a giant V, massive V, with 2 lights trailing. Now, this is 2 months before the mass sighting, and that's exactly what people would say during the mass sighting. The last picture that I posted there is actually this thing that I caught head on, this phenomena, actually turned, and you can see that now it's like the side of a V. And it was so unnerving that I had to call around the next morning to try to find a logical explanation. Again, I'm a healthy skeptic. There must be a logical explanation, right? So
Sure.
I finally found air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport who saw the same thing at the same time and they were very forthcoming initially, over Class B restricted airspace and about 1,000 feet altitude. And one of them was a meteorologist, and he knew his stuff. And he said, because what happened was that anybody that's in that 30-mile radius around the center of the airport must call into the tower, and no one called in, which alarmed them, and they looked immediately on radar, did not show up on radar. So they took their binoculars to look, and what they saw was, in their own description, was 6 points of light, totally equidistant from each other, massive span, over a mile wide. These lights seemed to be attached to something, but they couldn't quite see what it was attached to, which we also hear by thousands of people during the mass sighting. And we'll get to that in a second. But the meteorologist said that the whole thing turned as a unit against the wind and then elevated slowly and moved in synchrony behind South Mountain. So I said, so what was it? And there was silence. And then one of the air traffic controllers said, beats me. I said, your air traffic controllers are supposed to know it's in our airspace, and you didn't know what it was? They had no idea. They ruled out every conventional aircraft, flares, Chinese lanterns, balloons, blimps, even skydivers with lights, okay? And we stayed in contact to including March 13th. Now we're on March 13th, when thousands of people were purposely looking up in the sky for a glimpse of the Hale-Bopp comet, which was very clear in the northwest sky that night. And they also got a glimpse of Mile, and we just found out recently that the National UFO Reporting Center Director, Peter Davenport, has divulged from his data that one of the craft was actually 8 miles wide. Now,
Wow.
March 13th, whatever you've heard, there is so much misinformation and disinformation, and that was one of the reasons that I came forward to set the record straight, because it wasn't one or two events, as you would hear in the media. Yes, most people called the television stations and police stations and all between 8 and 10, because that's when they were out and about looking up at the sky at the Hale-Bopp comet. But the mass sighting actually, besides appearing 2 months before, and when you look at my 1995 pictures, okay, because I went back and another one showed up. So I have the first one when I caught the bottom two orbs, and then the last one where I caught the orb half disappeared and one's still there. The same exact phenomena is in the same exact location in the background in those photos. This is 35 millimeter. They're in the negative. Okay, so the same phenomena was there. But on March 13th, these began at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, daylight sightings of these phenomena. And what people were seeing were not only orbs, these giant orbs, balls, in rock-solid V formation, mile wide and larger, but also actual craft. And there was a 12-year study done by the National UFO Reporting Center, thousands of reports, as well as the Arizona MUFON, as well as Councilwoman Vice Mayor Frances Barwood, who I'll get into, and she was the only elected official that innocently asked for an investigation months later in May, and she was plastered. I mean, there was so much ridicule and discrediting going on. I was very happy to stay anonymous. And Village Labs, which was a giant computer lab, but on the side, they actually, and there's another little coincidence, would analyze UFO sightings from around the world, okay, for decades.
Right.
So anyway, began at 3 p.m., daylight sightings here in Arizona. 5:30 hour, they were seen in New Mexico by Native Americans. 7 o'clock hour in California. There was a call the following morning at 3 a.m. by an alleged crewman from Luke Air Force Base who called the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle. We have part of his recorded report, which is very professional and very credible, in our documentary, so you can actually hear it. And he reported that there was one of these craft, and it wasn't just one or two craft, it was 10 different craft that they finally, deciphered from all the data, and 2 or more people had to see the same craft, and whether it was one craft that could morph, or the perspective from where the person was standing, or a parade, which is ultimately what the investigators concluded, because, again, there were many things happening at the same time in different locations. But one of these mile-wide craft was right over Central Phoenix, 7th Avenue and Indian School. And supposedly, because the recording even says it, that Luke Air Force Base actually sent out jets to intercept and get gun camera film of this craft. And as they approached, the lights dimmed, and then the entire thing blinked out, freaking out one of the pilots who this crewman said that he helped out of his aircraft. Now, this continued. The sightings continued. In fact, there were reports from 2 separate commercial airlines. The 11 o'clock hour, they were seeing one of these massive over-mile-wide craft over Las Vegas. It covered Las Vegas. And there's a whole story to that when one of them tried to report it that I have in my book. And then as the sightings continued all the way until 5:30 the next morning, the last report we have, the last official report we have, is from a crewman, a Boeing crewman, who is coming into work with his crew, and one of these mile-wide craft was sitting right over their tarmac at Sky Harbor. So this was going on for over a dozen hours. There were many things happening at the same time. And again, if you go on the Phoenix Lights Network GAP page, G-A-P, Geospatial Animation Project, you'll be able to see these beautifully illustrated crafts. And they're very different. I mean, they're really different. With different lights, with different, some are V-shaped, some are triangle shaped, there's even a disc shape. And they have different numbers of lights. And what people were saying, and this is another thing with technology, we're talking at rooftop level, right over people's heads. We have a pilot who is in our documentary. In fact, we were just both interviewed by Travel Channel, and they were just blown away by the data because he was standing right under one of these crafts looking into this well. They called it like a canister of light. The light did not reflect out. It was self-contained, like energy in there. And you know, when people also saw these lights, these orbs detach from the main object, go out into the environment, and then redock with it later. Other people, and if you go to the GAT page, G-A-T, on the Phoenix Lights Network website, one of the craft actually split in two and then shot up straight into the air. Now, again, 2 or more people had to see the same experience, okay? And another one, which blew me away when I saw it, because it's like a carpenter's square type thing that has, each light is 3 lights. When I saw that one illustrated, it blew me away, and there's some animations on that page too that are really cool. But that one blew me away because I had just learned that there was another mass sighting in February 19th, 1997, over St. Petersburg, Russia. And a couple of people, civilians, got video. And that one and another one were exactly what we saw over Phoenix and New Mexico and California and Nevada on March 13th. So whoever's doing this is doing it worldwide. And that's the other issue, because I had no idea that this is happening worldwide until a week after the mass sighting, when suddenly one of the investigators from Village Labs, Jim Zalatoso, was on the news showing from his database the same exact triangle formations in Belgium and UK and all around the world. And that really set me on the journey to find out what the heck was going on. And again, I pushed my whole medical order aside to try to find a logical explanation. Not only I've yet to find it, but I ended up with a 750-page journal of just such compelling data. I mean, how could I not share that and let people decide for themselves? And I finally decided, even though it was very precarious for a physician to come forward, especially in those days, in 2004. But I came forward in 2004, and then at the time I went back to work as the chief clinical consultant of the Wellness and Imaging Center at the Arizona Heart Institute, which I loved. It was a fabulous job, while I condensed the book down. And, once I came forward, I was approached by filmmakers, including Steve Lance, who ultimately I partnered with to get a documentary out there, and we won over a dozen International Film Festival Awards. I hope people take a look at it. If you have Amazon Prime, it is free to watch. And also, I just recently finished, because I'm working on a curriculum, getting back to my love for children and young people and educating them to the reality of things, to teach them the reality of this vital topic with the Phoenix Lights, UFOs, and Crop Circles Adventures of Sue F.O., Field Observer, and Hugh, H-U-G-H, Hugh F.O. He's a little alien, and I worked with as the illustrator, and we have, it's based on the Phoenix Lights, but we have pictures from all over the world. We have the history of UFOs. We also have 80 crop circles to color, which are amazing, and a map maker, David Waseby, came to Phoenix and actually to scale drew the different crafts that people can color. And then we have all kinds of activities and word finders and all kinds of good stuff, and the answers. So I hope people will check that out as well.
Great. And I thank you so much for the work you've done on this. I found, and I've watched the documentary at least 3 times. And
really? Oh, that's great.
Yes, I have. And I've really been following this issue for well over 20 years, and going back to Roswell, the 1952 D.C. sightings, the Socorro, New Mexico sighting, Rendlesham Forest. I mean, the list goes on and on. 2004 Nimitz now just came out. You just mentioned that. And then we had the 2006 Chicago O'Hara sighting. This particular case, I think, is more intriguing and more fascinating than just about any other case I've read about and have looked into. What I wanted to ask is, you talked about kind of about the timeline of how events unfolded when you saw these things. Now
we're just getting started here.
Now
as the story unfolds, it gets even more intriguing.
Right.
There was no investigation or no explanation by the military or government. It was just uncanny. I mean, here, thousands and thousands of people were seeing these phenomena right over their heads, rooftop level, totally silent, and yet they're not saying anything. They're not doing anything. I mean, it was like, what? Something happened on March 13th, they would say. And until... Actually, I didn't mention in May, Councilwoman Barwood, she was vice mayor at the time, asked for an investigation, and they just plastered her in the media, especially the print media. But on June 18th, and this is when things start to turn around a little bit, on June 18th, front page USA Today article, which was really the first time that anyone outside of Arizona even heard about the mass sighting, really opened it up to international scrutiny. We were deluged by media from all over the world. And once they would talk to the witnesses, their descriptions were so detailed and so heartfelt that they, too, were saying, why isn't there an investigation? Why isn't there an explanation? And lo and behold, the very next day, the first thing that was ever uttered by government or military, our former Governor Fife Symington called for an unscheduled press conference that afternoon, the very next day, after the USA Today article, to divulge the culprit of the lights over Phoenix, quote unquote. And everyone took it seriously, reporters and witnesses alike. And here he comes marching out, one of his aides, in a giant alien head costume, and made a mockery of it. He made a joke, which was not a joke to the people that actually saw it, especially parents. It was very disconcerting for them because, I mean, here they're with their kids, and we're talking people were out playing golf, people were having baseball games, all that kind of stuff, and seeing this go right over them, and like at 2 or 3 shopping centers wide, and they're making a joke out of it. So that kind of put a lid on it for a little bit. In the next few weeks after that, I called every military base and tried to talk to as high up as I could to find out what was going on, because this wasn't a joke. And they were more interested in seeing what I had documented on film than giving an explanation for it. They had no idea. They would say they don't. In fact, I even say it in my book. One of them said, well, the only people that know who did this is God and whoever did this. That was the explanation.
Right.
Then I get a call on July the 24th from one of the heads of PR at the Air National Guard. And she says, oh, Dr. Lynne, I think we know what those lights were back in March. And I said, you do? And I was really excited because I was looking for any logical explanation. And she said, do you believe that we never looked at the log for visiting Air National Guard, and the Maryland Air National Guard was in town sending off military illumination flares in Operation Snowbird, which I later found out means diversionary tactical maneuvers in military terms. So they may have been sending off flares, but that certainly isn't what the witnesses to the Phoenix lights saw. There wasn't one person that described a flare characteristic. But she said that must be what some people saw. So I said, wait a minute, when was the Maryland Air National Guard in town? And she said, March 1st to the 15th. I said, were they in town in January? She said, oh, no. I said, are you sure? She said, absolutely not. I said, well, I have 35-millimeter photographs of the same exact phenomena in the same exact location 2 months before the mass sighting, confirmed the next morning by air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport as hovering over Class B restricted airspace, 1,000 feet altitude. And she says, you never told me that. And then I said, well, wait a minute. Besides that, I said, you're trying to tell me that flares, they cannot keep a formation. They're dropped out of airplanes on a parachute. They drift and drop with the wind haphazardly, have huge smoke trails that are illuminated by the flare itself. And their purpose is to illuminate the area around it, which not one witness to the Phoenix Lights described. I said, you're telling me that flares that cannot keep a formation traverse the entire state in a rock-solid, equidistantly spaced mile-wide V formation for hours?
Right.
And she says, I have a call coming in. I'll get back to you. Well, I'm still waiting.
So I am a retired Air Force reserve officer, and I found that explanation fairly ridiculous myself. And I wanted to get back to Fife Symington, and you mentioned...
I'm going to get to him. I promise. I'm
Okay.
going to get to him because it's very interesting how the story progresses. First of all, 3 years after the mass sighting, and I'll get to him in 1 minute. 3 years after the mass sighting, former, and at the time she was still a councilwoman, Vice Mayor Frances Barwood, was running for Secretary of State to get answers for the Phoenix Lights, even just as a public safety issue, and also asking for a reenactment, which most of us, would welcome, okay? Well, right before the third anniversary, in March of 2000, we get an public announcement, that 3 Air National Guards were coming into town to send off flares to show everyone the Phoenix Lights. Now, whether they thought this was going to confuse the issue or debunk the issue or whatever, it was a dire failure for them. I mean, it was a joke. Talk about a joke. I mean, they tried to make a triangle. It was upside down. It fell apart immediately, as you remote show, just what flares do. It put the nail in the head. I mean, this is their shot. They blew it.
Right.
They put the nail in the coffin that it definitely was not flares. And to date, these phenomena have never been recreated or explained. And by the way, they have never addressed in 22 years the craft that people saw. And people saw gunmetal on the bottom and windows and beings at the windows. I mean, there is so much to this story. Needless to say, I had a 750-page journal, and there's a lot has happened since, including right after the 10th anniversary, for whatever reason. And I had come forward in 2004, and this was right after the 10th anniversary. And, hopefully I helped him become brave enough to divulge this. But our former Governor Fife Symington, who had mocked the sighting in 97, came forward to disclose that he actually saw one of these craft. And as an awarded military pilot, it definitely wasn't flares. And in his own words, as other countries would say, it was otherworldly.
Right.
That was a giant step forward, I have to say, in the fact that an elected official came forward to divulge that he actually saw these strange, mysterious, anomalous phenomena, and that it wasn't explainable.
Right, and I find that fascinating that he came out and did that. I know that really sat wrong with a lot of people, that press conference, but he actually came out. I remember him doing an appearance on Larry King Live talking about this event, and that's where I really began to take notice. I was aware of this event, but that's kind of where I really began to take notice, because I thought, well, here's a former governor of Arizona saying what he saw was otherworldly, and there's no way a former trained pilot knows what flares look like and how they drop down and away. And he's a trained pilot. He's going to know what that looks like. But the amount of credible witnesses you have in this case, including yourself, I know Councilwoman Frances Barwood, she wasn't actually experiencing it, but she was taking all of the reports from the public.
Exactly.
And so she was trying to get to the...
She was doing her job. I mean,
right.
Here she's, vice mayor, and she's getting all these calls. She got over 1,000 calls. and yet they're not doing anything. And she innocently asked for an investigation, which was what you should do if people or constituents are asking her what's going on. And it's such a shame. I mean, I have to say, people, at that point in the 90s, the late 90s, were really being ostracized for even, attempting to come forward or talk about it. By the time I came forward in 2004, which is interesting, not that much had changed, but, it was like, enough is enough.
Right.
Enough with the ridicule, the snickering. Something's going on. I have the data to prove it. I have 35 millimeter that I had extensively analyzed and authenticated that cannot be explained or denied. And over 10,000 people saw this. I mean, it's not like, and I don't know if I could have come forward if the mass sighting hadn't happened. I mean, it would just be, the world against the pictures. But, the fact that thousands of people saw what I had been documenting for 2 years really was a giant leap. And then with the governor coming forward, that really put it on the map because, again, like you said, I mean, it got people's attention and they really started looking at the data. And, I'm very grateful that he did that. And more people need to come forward. In fact, it's very interesting, credible people, it's very interesting that just this past year, not only did we learn about the military and pilot study through the New York Times being done, a $22 million study for a number of years, but in my book, because it's very interesting, the morning after the mass sighting, I called the air traffic controllers again because it seemed like the same exact phenomena appeared in the same exact location during the mass sighting that I caught on video, as I had gotten head-on turning into a V 2 months before. And what they told me was, yes, it was over Class B restricted airspace, 1,000 feet altitude, same exact phenomena as 2 months before. And one of them mentioned that a private pilot had called in to say, what the heck are these lights in front of me? Well, I thought that was really important because even though I didn't know who it was very meaningful that a pilot actually reported it right where I was filming it, when I was filming it.
Right.
And I had no idea who that was, but I did mention it in my book. And here, just this past year, that pilot has come forward. And who was it? None other than Kurt Russell,
Right.
the famous film actor. He was on approach with his son. Him and Goldie Hawn have a place, or they did have a place at the time out in Carefree, and his son had a date, and he was bringing him in as a private pilot into Phoenix, and his son actually saw it first, and that's really interesting. We'll talk about real-time and long-term effect, and it was children that actually over and over again saw these phenomena first, and mile-wide V formations coming towards them and alerted their parents. But anyway, Kurt Russell's son saw it first and said, "Dad, what's that?" And they saw these 6 lights in a row, equidistant from each other, just like I was seeing from my vantage point. And he reported it to air traffic control, and landed, never talked any more about it. And this is also an interesting aside, and because there were other people that also just forgot about it. It just went out of their memory until he walked in one night a few years ago and saw Goldie Hawn watching a show on the Phoenix Lights on TV. And they mentioned, because I also talked about it, that a pilot had called in to report the lights. And he said, wait a minute. He said it was like a Richard Dreyfuss moment. If you want to look at his UK interview, it's really cool. It's on our homepage of the Phoenix Lights Network website, if you click on that link. But anyway, he said that it was like a Richard Dreyfuss moment where he just knew he had seen this. It was really bizarre, and he went to check his log just to see, and here it was. He had actually documented it and just forgot about it, which is a very, very interesting and poignant characteristic for a number of the people that saw the Phoenix Lights. They were told telepathically not to worry about it. They forgot about it. In fact, there's a psychiatrist that just came forward last year, who I also talk about in the book anonymously, who wrote a big report, long report, that he and his family were coming up from Tucson, which is 2 hours south of Phoenix, and as they're coming up for a swim meet, the wife was driving, the doctor was in the passenger seat, and the daughter and a friend were in the back seat. But one of these craft was right above their car. In fact, he said the wingspan was over on both sides, not only the highway, but extended way into the fields on each side, and he really got a really good look at it. And his wife got a telepathic message not to worry. They weren't here to harm us, to just keep driving. Many other people actually pulled over to take a look at it. And getting back to the kids, Independence Day movie was real popular a couple months, like 6 months before.
Right.
And we're so inundated with threat, and harm. Dr. Gary Schwartz, who is the head of the Cognitive Study Department at the University of Arizona, made a very poignant statement in the documentary when he said, if you're inundated with threat, and harm, how do you think you're going to react when you see the thing that you're told is going to be scary, right?
Absolutely.
So they were scared, and they were jumping up and down, Independence Day. But as the phenomena got closer, a calmness came over everyone, a connectedness to the phenomena, children and adults alike, to where after it passed, kids wanted to run after it or have the parents get in the car and chase it. A real, in time, it was just amazing how it transformed people in real time. People were in awe. People were in wonder. There has not been one, and this is really important to impart, there has not been one credible report in 22 years of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the Phoenix Lights phenomena. Can't speak for other things, but I can for the Phoenix Lights phenomena. And that in itself is telling. And not only that, but if anything, people were in awe. People were in wonder. People just felt blessed that they had this experience. That doesn't happen with balloons and flares and helicopters, okay?
Right.
Not only that, in real time, in long term, that was real time. In long term, people went into the environmental movement, people went into the peace movement, people stopped eating meat. It really just woke up people, not only to the fact that we are not alone in the universe, but it just touched people to the core, to where they really changed their lifestyle almost. Their worldview. Everybody comes from a different background, from a different upbringing, from a different worldview and background. And some people can't deal with this topic. Some people don't want to. That's okay. Everyone in their own time. But now the data is there if people want to look at it. And I hope that they do. I hope they look at the book, The Phoenix Lights, A Skeptics Discovery That We Are Not Alone. Our newest, because it keeps evolving, new things keep happening all the time. The newest version of the documentary is The Phoenix Lights Beyond Top Secret. And now The Phoenix Lights, UFOs and Crop Circles activities, and a graphic novel coloring book for all ages. I really wanted to do something that would be a workbook for parents or grandparents or teachers or whatever, where they can, really sit down, and I try to compile the most credible data. There's 80 crop circles to color, and there's activities and word finders, all kinds of good stuff in there, so that people could learn and grow if they choose.
Right. So one of the things I wanted to ask is, you've been researching this for years now after you had your first experience. And you already touched on the positive aspects this has had on other people who witnessed these craft. I'm just wondering if, so I'm listening to Coast AM with George Norrie, and he's interviewing Ph.D. astronomer David Weintraub, and he's really trying to pin him down on the extraterrestrial topic and what he feels about it. And eventually got to the point where, the professor just basically said, I don't think extraterrestrials are visiting us. Now, you already mentioned the 2017 F-18 video that came out, the New York Times story that broke.
Right.
Astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, very famous astrophysicist, has still come out and said he doesn't think this was extraterrestrial. I'm just wondering, does it frustrate you to hear this sort of thing? Because I know it does me, and there's still people making statements like this.
Well, like I said, everybody comes from a different background, and some people have agendas, to be honest with you. I know that some professors can lose their grants if they mention UFOs. But besides that, everybody's entitled to an opinion, and that sounds like an opinion if he hasn't seen it. And that's where, my own effort, and it's not about me, it's about the data, but my own effort to get at a grassroots level the data out there so people can actually look at it and decide for themselves, I think is really important because, you don't have to have an unexplained phenomena experience. I call it an UP, and I also found a connection between all unexplained phenomena. I'll leave you with this because a number of people, and we didn't even get into this in the documentary, but I do in the book, a number of people that had near-death experiences as children that was reawakened by the mass sighting, the Phoenix Lights mass sighting, which I found really curious and really profound because I did too when I was 8 years old, and I put it all out there in the book. But what was most poignant for me, thinking about it, I thought, wow, could there possibly be a connection between all unexplained phenomena, whether it's near-death experience, out-of-body experience, or unexplained aerial phenomena associated with a mystical light? And lo and behold, again, when I started looking, I started finding not only the history of these phenomena since human documentation began, and, which is a whole other topic, the close correlation they had to Native Americans and their beliefs and indigenous peoples worldwide who were very open to these phenomena and even had protocols to invite them in. But the other thing is when I started looking, I started finding university studies that were pertaining to the connection of all unexplained phenomena, not only the Omega Project at the University of Connecticut, authored by Dr. Kenneth Ring, but the Peer Institute at Harvard was also studying these phenomena, and on and on. I mean, there is documentation, and I made it very simple in the book. Not only are each of these different unexplained phenomena experiences, whether it's near-death experience, out-of-body, or unexplained aerial phenomena with a mystical light, they seem different, but they're actually very, very similar when you look at the data. But what's most profound, and you brought this up, is the after effect is so positive, the awakening, the enlightenment that a person experiences when they have an unexplained phenomena experience. Whether it's in our DNA or whatever, it just wakes us up to the fact that we're not alone in the universe, that we're all connected, that we're connected to the universe and to the earth and to each other. I mean, in such a profound, positive way. I started calling all unexplained phenomena an UP, and UP. But let me make it clear that I don't know what these things were. I don't know who's behind it. And I never, ever say that it's definitely this or definitely that. It might be extraterrestrial. It might be time travelers. It might be interdimensional beings. I don't know. But I know that it is, okay? And it's not a belief. It's a knowing, okay? And people that actually know, people that haven't had the experience and haven't really studied the data, because I find that people that blow it off, and I'm not saying it's ET. I'm just saying that it's something that is anomalous, that it is still not explained, and it's got to be studied. We've got to get this out in the open, and that's why I came forward after 7 years of anonymity, to set the record straight, let people know what really happened here, and to say it's enough with the ridicule and the snickering and the discrediting. It's time we get this out in the open and address it, accept it, and study it, so we can not only find out who's driving these things, but also move forward in our own evolution. And that's why I've dedicated my life's work now for the last 22 years, just to be able to be there to help people learn and grow and document what's really happened and let them decide for themselves.
Right. So that brings up a good point. there's a lot of people. There's an army. I had Preston Dennett on the show last year. He's going to be back on the show with me pretty soon.
I'm sorry, say again?
I had UFO researcher and author Preston Dennett on the show last year.
Right.
And one of his points was there's an army of UFO researchers out there. And more people, one of the statistics I've seen is over 60% believe there's something to this UFO phenomena. Why is it that we cannot get the government, and well, I guess let me back up. Why do you think, and do you think the government at this point is still covering up what they truly know about this?
I think that there's a lot more behind the scenes. And I mean, we know now with the new show Project Blue Book, they're finally divulging the truth. On that show, at least, that J. Allen Hynek, who was plugged as the head astronomer or director of astronomy at Ohio State, I believe, but I know at Northwestern, was plucked out to head the only publicly acknowledged study of UFOs. And we know that there were others behind the scene, Project Grudge, Project Sign, etc. This was in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. Project Blue Book actually closed in 69. Now, if you watch the show Project Blue Book, which is a dramatization, and of course they're going to be dramatic, but the cases are actual cases, and the fact is that they do, true to form, show that J. Allen Hynek was a skeptic, but he was really pushed into explaining everything that he could. The ones he came forward, by the way, after Project Blue Book closed in 69, with the announcement that UFOs are not a threat to national security. Well, first of all, how did they come up with that? Unless they were studying it, okay. But
right.
Besides that, J. Allen Hynek actually, and he's the one that created the phrase swamp gas and also Close Encounters, and he's in the movie Close Encounters at the very end when the ship lands. They do a panorama of the different people standing there, and he's standing there. He has a little beard, a little goatee. But anyway, he opened the Center for UFO Studies in Chicago after he left Project Blue Book, okay, number one, after he had been a skeptic and tried to discredit or debunk all the sightings that he could. But he also came forward in 85, and this is shortly before he passed. And there were at least several interviews that I saw in the past years where he was admitting that he was told not to panic the public and to try to explain away as much as he could. And he wanted, I guess, to get it off his chest. But he also made a very poignant statement, and I'm going to leave you with this. He was so brilliant, actually, and said, science happens in threes. The first stage is complete disbelief. The second stage is, well, it might be so. And the third and final stage is, I know it all the time. And I think that we're getting closer and closer to this final stage. And yet, there's some people that are going to lag behind because they're just not interested, or they're frightened of the topic for whatever reason, or they just don't want to get involved, or they have an agenda because they're of their job or whatever. Because many pilots, and I'm receiving many, many messages on Facebook. People should go to Phoenix Lights Network Facebook page if they choose, because I post a lot of updates there. But I also get a lot of messages from people. I always say it's very cathartic and healing to share, even if you just share with one person. So I welcome people to share with me if they would like to. But the point is that now I'm getting messages, emails and messages on Facebook from pilots and military that are retired, that had experiences that they could not talk about because they were threatened with their careers. So, the more that those people come forward, incredible people like Kurt Russell come forward and others, I think the more comfortable, and that was another reason I wanted to come forward, was just to say it's enough already, let's talk about this.
Right.
And hopefully more and more people will feel comfortable talking about it and look at the data. When somebody says to me, oh, it's flares, and they just blow it off, I know they didn't look at the book. I know that they didn't study the data at all. Because it definitely wasn't flares, and that's the only explanation they ever came up with. They even proved it wasn't flares when they tried to reenact it, and it was a joke. And not only that, but just in the last couple of years, another guy who had advanced technology on his computer tried to stabilize or see if the boomerang, which was really the one that was discredited as being flares, or people that tried to discredit it as being flares, which, by the way, was shot after 10 o'clock. My video, which is the only one that's been authenticated, is a true unknown because it was seen by the air traffic controllers, too, and now Kurt Russell. But there's another one also that was shot by a group of MUFON people because this guy, Steve Blonder, was seeing the same thing I was seeing and photographing them for days before the mass sighting, and called MUFON to his balcony. He happened to be there when this giant arrowhead of 5 lights appeared before 10 o'clock. The boomerangs were at 10 o'clock. But anyway, there were 2 boomerangs after 10 o'clock. And this guy took the most impressive one and tried to show how stable and it's on our news page on the Phoenix Lights Network website. If you scroll down, he actually shows that longer than a minute, whatever it is, those lights are rock solid in equidistant array. And one of them on the end actually accelerates up and breaks into 2, which flares don't do. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So, to date, it's never been proven to be anything else other than something anomalous, and I'd love somebody to tell me what they were and where they're from.
Right. I wanted to ask one more question about this, and I'm sure there's been theories put out there. I'm curious, based on all the research and you following this phenomena for so many years now, what do you think ultimately they were trying to do here, and why? Because you've had other, they've returned. You've had other pictures captured. I've looked at the website. You've captured these lights on later dates. I think, maybe it was 2001, 2003 time frame. What do you think they are trying to tell us, and what are they trying to do here? Okay.
First of all, I have continued to photograph these phenomena. In fact, the latest one I had was 2013. I photographed an arc of 4 lights, and I even realized, until I got the 35 millimeter back, that there was an orb right in front of me while I was on the balcony, actually moving in front of me. You can see the tail of it. So these things have been around for centuries. Why they're around, I have no idea, but I have to share that 6 months before the mass sighting, and this is important data too, I was invited to present my substance abuse prevention education program to the Gila Bend Indian Reservation. They have one school. It's situated in between the basin of Slough Mountain and the Estrella Mountain Range. If you go onto the photo page on the Phoenix Lights Network website, the first picture shows the topography, and you can see South Mountain on the left, and then a few miles back is the Estrella Mountain Range, and they intersect in one area. And that's where the Gila Bend very sacred ground is. So I noticed that, and this was 6 months before the mass sighting, that I presented my program there, and I helped them out. They usually don't talk to outsiders, but I called them up after the mass sighting because I noticed in my pictures that, and again, the data speaks for itself, that these phenomena kept popping up right in that area. So I asked them, did anybody see strange lights on March 13th? And they started to giggle. And I said, is that funny? And they said, are you kidding? We've been looking up at them for centuries. We call them sky people, light beings. It's part of their culture. I had no idea. That was the first I had ever heard of this. And then when I researched that interesting avenue, I found that indigenous peoples worldwide for centuries have been inviting these phenomena in, are welcoming these phenomena. Many think that these orbs are either ancestors or spirit world coming to give them knowledge and comfort and inspiration. And I have to say, since I saw the orbs in 95, I certainly have been inspired to do what I'm doing. For whatever reason, I would have never chosen this. I didn't know anything about this. But the fact is that they welcome them. They are very comfortable with them. In fact, the day before our mass sighting, there was a big sighting up in the Navajo Nation, where they took their lawn chairs out and just watched it for an hour, these orbs going around in circles clockwise and then counterclockwise. I mean, it's just part of their culture. And they said to me that that's how the Estrellas got its name. It means star in Spanish. These things have been around a long, long time. And there's even petroglyphs that are etched out, drawings in the rocks that are centuries old of the same exact thing, the same exact three orbs in a pyramid that my husband and I saw. Someone found on South Mountain. And then they told me that they believe that there is a portal or gateway in that area as well. And again, if you look at my website and you look at the photo page and you look at my data on there, these things keep popping up in the same place time after time after time. So whether there is a portal or gateway, I'll leave your listeners to decide. But I also on that page, at the bottom of the page, you'll see two different sunset pictures. Again, I collect sunsets, and I did not see this when I was taking pictures of these beautiful sunsets. The same rod or cigar-shaped giant object was in the same exact spot a month apart. Okay, take a look at those pictures. And people here have been seeing these, not only in the Navajo Nation, which is up north of Arizona, where they've seen orbs or this craft come out from what they would call a mothership, from these giant rod-shaped objects, and also over the Superstition Mountains here. But it's not just Arizona. It's happening worldwide, and I hope people, again, will check out the Phoenix Lights, the Skeptics Discovery, that we are not alone, because there is so much more. I condensed the best. Every word is there for a reason. From 750 pages initially at 250, and now it's grown to 350, or 300 and some, because it keeps evolving, and I hope people will check it out and check out our film and also the graphic novel coloring book, which is really, really fun. It's 160 pages. There's a black and white version, which is 150 pages, and we have some colored pictures in the other one. They're really, really fun, and when people see them, they grab them out of my hand. I can't keep them in my hand. We have a big event coming up on March 17th at the Scottsdale Hark and Shea Theater, which is sold out every year since the world premiere in 2005. So if anybody's in the Phoenix area that would like to come, they better get their tickets quick, because it's selling out fast, and we show the documentary on the big silver screen, which is fun. We have speakers. We have wonderful, wonderful speakers this year. The Councilwoman will be there, Vice Mayor Barwood, as well as Travis Walton, who is historic in his own right as a contactee. We have the psychiatrist is coming forward this year. We also have a message from another celebrity, a local, actually international celebrity who happens to live in Phoenix, who had a UFO sighting that's going to talk about him. It's a year of the witness this year. So it's at matinee prices, and it's 1 to 5 on March 17th, Sunday, March 17th. And I'll also be speaking at Contact in the Desert the last weekend in May, and not only lecturing but doing a workshop, check it out, that will really be getting into not only the connection between all unexplained phenomena, how it's affected the witnesses at a very profound spiritual level, but how one can connect to these other intelligences. There is a way. So I hope that people will check that out as well. And if you check out the Phoenix Lights Network Facebook page, I will also be speaking on a cruise in October. That should be amazing. And there's other fabulous, fabulous speakers going on that cruise. That should be really, really special, a special adventure for everyone. So I hope you'll check them out and keep looking up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all that. It's just such an intriguing case. There's so much to it.
Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. And, I just want people to look at the data and then decide for themselves, because the more, you don't have to have an up experience to have a positive transformation. If you open your mind and your heart and study it and look at it, you're going to start experiencing serendipities and really start to realize that we are not alone in this universe, such a vast universe with billions of other galaxies we know are older than ours. So when a star bursts we're made of stardust. It's organic materials that are spread throughout the universe. They call it panspermia. There's probably a lot more happening out there, and I look forward to the future and the wonders of the universe. And thank you again for having me.
Yes, and
letting me share.
Absolutely, and it was great to hear the story and how you kind of laid it all out there. Can you just share the website real fast that
sure,
people can go to?
It's www.thephoenixlights.net, thephoenixlights.net, and if you Google Phoenix Lights, it usually comes up in the first handful of links there. Phoenix Lights Network. Phoenix Lights Network. And so we're also on Facebook if you want to check that out. And that has a direct link to the website. And there is so much to explore and consider. And I hope your listeners will do that.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Dr. Lynne, for spending the time with me. It's been a real pleasure. And hopefully we can talk again down the road a ways.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Keep looking up.
All right. Have a great night.
Now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, big thanks to Dr. Lynne Kitei for taking time out of her busy schedule to join me on the show. What a great discussion that was. What amazing experiences she's had related to this event. And hopefully you get a chance to pop over and visit the Phoenix Lights Network site she talked about. And thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's episode. And make sure you join me in the next episode where I'll have paranormal investigators Zach Waters and Paul Welsh of Paranormal Veracity Media joining me. They are also creators of the YouTube film Eureka Unearthed Echoes of the Past. So it's really going to be exciting to have them on the show, talk about their experiences, and talk about their new film, a fairly recent film. And once again, thank you so much for tuning in to the show, and we'll look forward to next episode.